gentlemen, we have Dr. Ben Bishop here with us, who has his PhD from Penn State University, and he's the current professor up at the University of Scranton. Please welcome Dr. Ben Bishop.
All right, thank you. So I am going to talk about web APIs for 3D printing. And just to give you a little bit of background, I'm in computer science, and this isn't, the way that 3D printing is kind of related to my research area would be computer graphics. You know, for some projects, we may want to visualize problems that we're working on with graphics, and 3D printing can be a handy way to do that. Also, like processing the files before you send them to the printer, like manipulating STL files, things like that. So that's a little bit of background. Okay, and then before I get into this, I wanted to kind of motivate the talk a little bit. So one of the things that came up in one of the earlier presentations was this idea of mass customization. So, you know, you could imagine somebody wants to have some custom box that they put on their bicycle, okay, or any number of things that you might see a student go into a lab and print out. Well, how is that going to happen in the future? Is it going to be that somebody decides that they want to have this product, and they go out and they buy this couple $100 printer, teach themselves CAD, and then eventually build their product and use it? You know, or is there going to be some alternative system? And what I would argue is that there is going to be this alternative system. That if I want some sort of customized bike component, I'm just going to go and Google it, and there's going to be some web app that I'll put in. Well, what exactly do I want? You know, what are the dimensions of this box that are going to go onto my bike? What's the diameter that it's got to clip onto on the bicycle frame? And basically, this API stuff essentially makes that happen under the hood. Okay. So just to be kind of formal about it, so the API, that's the interface that we use. So if I'm writing some sort of software, if I'm building a web app, the API is what allows me to connect to this other thing, okay? And that other thing is, in this case, the 3D printing backend. So, you know, a company like Shapeways, for example, they have this API out there, and I can build a web app. And then when somebody goes and uses my website and they say, well, I want, you know, this particular kind of widget, that order automatically gets sent off to Shapeways. They ship it to the customer, and I don't have to do anything. Okay, so that's essentially what this API gives you. Okay, it gives you a way to connect a website to a 3D printing process. Okay. And you know, just these APIs are really rudimentary at this point, but just to give you an idea of like what's involved in this process, the authentication, like how do I make sure that this is the user that's well, how do I know that they are who they say they are? Payment, you know, you have to handle credit cards, that sort of thing. Shopping cart management, stuff like that. So that's what's included in these APIs. And like I said, at this point, they're really rudimentary because, you know, the process ought to be very, very easy from a user's perspective. You should go to some website, say, I want this product, plug in your credit card and be done. And as it is now, there's a lot of, you know, you have to go to this other website to validate yourself, plug in some code back on the first website. So it's really in its infancy. Okay, so that's what the API is. Now, along with that, you have kind of the pros and cons of this outsourced 3D printing. So why order something, have it manufactured and shipped to you, as opposed to just getting your own 3D printer? And there are some trade-offs. The materials, for example, some of the sort of projects that I've explored with this, are metal-based. And like from some of the earlier talks, if I want to go out and buy some metal 3D printer, it might be $500,000, so that could be obviously a downside. Whereas, these outsourced companies, they already have those devices. So cost is an issue. Lead time is an issue because, obviously if they're going to be transported around, it's going to take more time. Reliability, it can be a bit hit or miss with the production quality that you get. Design rules, and also, the final form that the product takes. Like, so with these APIs, if somebody orders one of these products, it would actually be shipped direct from the company that had manufactured it. So, there can be issues about, how is that packaging presented, what kind of branding, et cetera. Okay. All right, so one of the things that kind of goes along with this is that these websites that you might create for a customer to be able to kind of design their own product, they rely on this idea of parametric design, which is that you don't just give the customer a complete CAD tool and say, here you go, build this box from scratch. Because there's a learning curve involved with that. Okay, you want to be able to take a technologically illiterate user and allow them to create the thing that they want. So in order to do that, you design this kind of generalized design. And then if the user says, well, I want that box to be 5 centimeters wide, 2 centimeters tall, 10 centimeters long, you can work from that. Okay, so that's a parametric design. And then, it doesn't have to be as simple as, just X, Y, Z coordinates, length, width, height. You could do something more complex. Here we have these hexagonal cutouts, and it's parameterizable in the size of those cutouts, the diameters of those wheels. So, it can be more involved than just very simplistic parameters. Okay, now this question here, what is a new killer product? So there were some analogies earlier about how additive manufacturing is maybe similar to the internet in terms of like the growth, the potential for growth. And I think one of the parallels that I see is maybe PCs back in like the early 80s, where it was this new technology, very popular with hobbyists, kind of similar to the consumer grade 3D printers today. But there was sort of this stagnation until there was the killer app, which was, back at that time, word processing, spreadsheets. Those sorts of applications really drove the demand for it. And what I'm curious about is, with these new technologies, with the ability to create these websites that are able to, kind of automatically send off a design and have it shipped to the customer, what kind of new products are enabled by that? Okay, and I think this is one of those things that nobody really knows at this point, and there are companies that are out there trying to explore this. And one of the, let me talk about this one. So, why am I interested in this? So I got interested in this collaboration with Al Brummagem, who's the founder of the entrepreneurship program up at Scranton. And I was kind of more of a technical guy, but I do have some entrepreneurial interests, and Al is obviously very entrepreneurial oriented. And he and I were talking about, well, is there some way that our students could work together, that we could pair up somebody that's very entrepreneurial minded with somebody that has these technical skills. Could we come up with some great learning experiences for them? And so he and I tried to explore this a bit ourselves, okay, in terms of, is there some sort of collaborative project that we could do as sort of a pilot for projects that our students might get involved with. And okay, so this idea we named Dwarpy. It's a .com, so it doesn't have to have a name that makes sense. And what we started with, and this is sort of version 1.0, what we started with was, well, what if you had, let's say, a vase that people could customize? And this is a visualization of that. And so the back end, like, how does this actually work? So I designed this web application. So you'd go to this site and you'd see this image of a vase, and there'd be a bunch of sliders, and you could say, well, no, I want to adjust it so that the base is larger, okay? Or that, if I go back to this, that visualization, maybe the curvature is changed, okay? Or rather than a star shape, maybe it's a triangular shape. Okay, so those were all parameters that could be adjusted. And what it would do, and I mean, this is probably a little bit of technical jargon here, but what it would do is that every time you change those sliders, it would dump out that information to OpenSCAD. OpenSCAD would generate a new STL. There's a JavaScript visualizer so that you could actually see like what this new design is. And then we integrated with the Shapeways API. So if you like that design, you could just click the button and say, yeah, I want one of those, okay? Or I want 10 of those. Okay, so that was the idea. And so how did we do? Really badly. Yeah, so we pursued this for a while, and it was just something that nobody wanted, which that's okay. But we learned some things from that, and we decided to check out this other idea instead. Maybe we could do something else. And so this was something that really, at that point, Al was kind of interested in some other things, so I delved into this a little bit more myself. And what I looked at were a bunch of kind of consumer items. And the nice thing about that was that it's possible to, what's the right word? It's possible to learn about what people want just based on what they're searching for online. Like you can get information out of Google about, like, if somebody types in custom guitar pick or custom whatever, you can look at, well, how often does that happen? Like, how many people are looking for these things? And so that allowed me to find a couple of markets where that people are interested in these things. Okay, rather than just developing something out of an idea that may have no connection to actual demand. Okay, so then what I did was I tried this idea of a smoke test where you basically just put up an ad and say, well, click on this site, we'll make you a custom guitar pick, right? And you can measure what the response is. So the CTR, that's click-through rate, that's of people that see that ad, who actually clicks on it? Like, what percentage do you get? And it's usually something like 0.5 to 3%. And I ran a bunch of these different ads just to kind of evaluate, like, which of these should we be working on. And it was almost 20% for hood ornaments, which I would have never thought of, but okay. So then I said, well, all right, is there anything that we could build to try to explore this? And I mean, you can imagine this. So this was in trying to actually sell these things, just a plain text site, a picture of like one metal 3D printed object, wasn't even a hood ornament, and just a description of what these things would be. And I was actually able to sell one of these based on that. But the way the system worked, it wasn't possible to use the 3D printing APIs because everything had to be custom designed. So this was a little bit problematic, but it was something that was required by the domain that we were working in. Okay, so how did this process actually work? Well, the customer would say, this is what I want. And these were pretty demanding customers. They had very, very specific requirements. I'll show an example of this in a minute. But then I would ship those requirements off to a designer in Eastern Europe who happened to be very economical. We'd fabricate the thing through Shapeways, not using the API. Then it turned out they said that they would apply one finish, but they actually failed to do that. So that there was a post-fabrication finishing step that was required, which actually made the whole process very time-consuming. But the customers actually tolerated it. So that object down at the bottom right, that is what the customer demanded. And it's interesting, there was another object that was in the shape of the state of Texas, which is actually what this is as well. So interesting that came up twice in the same conference. So that's a 210, which is apparently an area code in the shape of the state of Texas. This was sold to a car enthusiast, $200, which actually, given the process that we had, that was about break even. So we should have made the purchase price higher. I decided, it's not something that I'm interested in pursuing. I don't think it's something that the students would be interested in pursuing. I tried to get some students, some entrepreneurial students, some computer science students to try to collaborate on it. They really weren't interested in it. Although it was interesting because once I shut it down, I did have some potential customers that were hounding me by email to try to get me to build one of these things for them. So it was an interesting experience. Okay, so why did I shut it down? Well, it wasn't kind of what I was originally envisioning in terms of like using the 3D printing APIs being kind of more of a technical business. This was kind of more of a managerial, dealing with the subcontractors, dealing with the suppliers, Shapeways finishing problems. So I wasn't interested in it. Okay, but there are some other companies out there that are doing similar things. So Mixie Labs, that's kind of well known. There's that picture over on the left. These are guys that are, they're businesses that are similar to ones that would use the APIs. Okay, so in the case of the Mixie Labs, the one on the left, this gives you the ability to customize a 3D printed object to look like you. Okay, and the one on the right, I think this one is much more interesting to me because my brother actually asked me, is there a way that I could build my own customized small football helmet? And I told him, well, you could teach yourself 3D printing and CAD, but it turns out that there's actually a company that will do this for you, okay? And that's the example that's on the right. Okay, so those are some examples of companies that use this technology, but I think the question that's most interesting to me is, what is the future? I mean, what is the killer product that nobody has thought of yet, where customers really demand some sort of customized product that could be delivered in this kind of way? And how do you get students interested in that? Okay, so that's my talk. Any questions?
Questions for Ben?
So I'm kind of interested in the entrepreneurship component there. I mean, isn't that something you guys push around with Ken and make that a student-based project of some sort, or a school of some sort?
Well, I mean, the background that we're coming from, Al runs a project where it's allows a lot of flexibility for the student in that it would be something that would be printed on a T-shirt. So different entrepreneurship students, they might come up with different T-shirts and then try to sell those. He's shifting gears a bit to look at things like 3D printed objects. So could you have a bottle opener or something like that that you're trying to sell as an entrepreneurial project? But then taking that a step further, how can you use this sort of customization? So it's not just a bottle opener, it's a customized bottle opener. But my interest in that, to go maybe beyond that, would be how can you use the technology side, like what our computer science students have, how can you partner those two things together? And that's kind of where this work grew out of.
It strikes me, Ben, that you've got some really robust entrepreneurial programs in the region, whether it's at Stern, or it's at Groves, or it's at Strasbourg, at Marywood. There's some really robust collegiate programs on entrepreneurship. I think if we did a little bit more sort of promotion of the idea, we might be surprised that students would run this. I think that's something that's worth at least putting out there, because they're always looking for projects.
Yeah. Well, I'm just a computer science guy, so. Yes?
It's actually a little bit more of a comment on this whole thing, what you just said about student projects. Do you know what Etsy.com is?
Yes.
One of the most successful shops on there, they clear over $1 million a year, is actually t-shirts. They're just basically barely customized t-shirts. Like, you have people on there doing everything from jewelry to like car parts to actual storage things, and t-shirts are what sell the most. So it's like you kind of need to find the t-shirt of the 3D print thing. You need something that you can make for cheap, and that people, even though they normally would pay like $1, $5 for it, are willing to spend that $20, $30 for ones that like have their name on them or have that fun design.
Yeah, I think that the real challenge isn't even so much on the technical side, because there's a lot that we could do. I mean, say for example, if you had somebody upload a JPEG and you could emboss that onto a metal surface or something like that. It would be pretty easy to write the code to do that. But the harder thing is to figure out what is a customer willing to spend this much money on to get that customization. And I think that's the...
It's finding the right product for the customization. That's going to be the real piece there.
Any other questions?